My name is Daniel O'Brien. I'm the creative director of video for Cracked.com, and here's a bunch of crazy people on a bridge dropping cinder blocks on cars. Those people up on that bridge are actually French taxi drivers protesting the ride-sharing service Uber by chucking bricks at their cars and by flipping them over, setting them on fire, and generally shutting down the city in a swarm of screaming chaos. Those guys are really mad at Uber. Why? Well, Uber is taking all of their business. The company is currently valued at $50 billion and is growing by the second. It would be easy to say, of course they're mad. Taxis are the bloated establishment, and Uber is the hip new alternative. Chalk it up to another long overdue comeuppance for a dying industry. But I should also point out that Uber, at the risk of siding with the crazy people chucking the rocks, is totally and completely horrible. If you don't live in a place where Uber is a thing yet, or if you've just never used it, let's quickly catch you up. Uber is just an app on your smartphone you can use to get strangers to come and pick you up and give you a ride. And yet this simple idea is changing the world and doing it so quickly that nobody is quite sure how to think about it. Everybody remembers the first time they got into a taxi and thought, okay, I'm going to die. Today is the day I die. This is how I do it. This is the car where it happens. Fine. The vehicle smelled like dried puke and made a noise like one of the back wheels was about to go flying off at any moment. The driver was a terrifying former hitman for the Ukrainian mob who drove like he thought all of the other cars on the road were just figments of his imagination. When you got to your destination, after 47 near-death experiences, the guy grunted at your credit card and insisted that he could only accept cash because at some point in your trip, you'd passed through a wormhole and arrived in 1986. And guess what? You'd have had the exact same experience 30, 40, or 50 years ago. Only instead of a Ukrainian ex-mobster, you'd get Travis Bickle. It's just a horrible industry that hasn't innovated since they were doing it with rickshaws. On the back end, it's even worse. The taxicab industry is traditionally among the most corrupt sectors in the US local governments, awarding licenses called medallions to taxi drivers to indicate that they are certified to drive a cab, but instead of handing them out to anyone who qualifies, they create an artificial scarcity by handing out a finite number to taxi companies who, in turn, give them big campaign donations. For example, in Key West, Florida, they only have 72 of these licenses for the whole city, and they haven't added any in 20 years. That means if you want to get into the cab business, you have to beg an existing cab driver to turn over his license. In New York, it's even crazier. Competition over those precious few slots has driven up the price of a medallion to almost $1 million each, just for the right to get what everyone agrees is a terrible job. So when Uber came along, it seemed like it was almost too good to be true. And that's foreshadowing, by the way. What if, Uber says, instead of going through all that bullshit, you get a ride from a random dude who happens to be passing by? Just any dude with a car. We'll provide a smartphone app that lets you see who in your vicinity has an empty back seat. You tap a button, they come pick you up within minutes. Payment is quietly sucked out of your credit card, and tourists are pleased to see that their driver is probably a local hipster instead of one of those scary foreigners. It sounds almost utopian. Just regular folks helping each other out, using the magic of technology. Uber was going to do for transportation what Netflix did for binge-watching Frasier. And on the driver's end, it's even better. Pretty much anybody with a working car can sign up, so it's also solving our nation's unemployment problem. With all the bureaucratic garbage stripped away, they're able to pay the drivers more, up to $90,000 a year, according to Uber's website. 90,000 Why am I doing this? Does anybody need a ride? I have a car, I'm in LA. I could bring it to you. So there you go. Another of the world's problems solved by technology. Kind of like the first act of a Jurassic Park movie, where the scientist is all, hey, we found a way to breed dinosaurs that are bigger, and smarter, and angrier, and way better at climbing fences. Our customers they're just gonna love it. There's no potential for horror or anything. Just lots of happy park customers. Forever. To become a taxi driver in New York, you have to attend 6 hours of special driving classes, 24 hours of a separate taxi driving class, and the vehicles have to be inspected to make sure they're not about to spontaneously explode into shrapnel. Which makes sense, considering you and your loved ones are trusting your very lives to the ability of that driver and that car to get you across town without dying in a flaming wreck. Training to be an Uber driver, on the other hand, consists of a 13-minute YouTube video. That's it. If you have a license, a running car, and 13 minutes to spare, you are qualified to be an Uber driver. To provide some context, I had to interview twice for my first job at 15 years old, and that job was shoveling popcorn into a bag. 2 full interviews, but that still didn't result in me getting a job where I was in charge of anyone's safety or even given keys to anything. But this is part of Uber's appeal. Anybody can do it. Well, you can guess where this is going. In August of 2015, it was discovered that at least 4 Uber drivers in Los Angeles were allowed to drive for the company despite having criminal records involving manslaughter, a DUI, identity theft, and child exploitation. These are records that would preclude you from being an LA taxi driver, but Uber's background check system is apparently super easy to get around, mainly because Uber needs lots and lots of drivers for the system to work. They had 160,000 drivers as of last year, and they expect that that number will be in the millions within 5. They're not exactly being picky, is what I'm saying. But that half-assed screening process means a person who has driven drunk could be your Uber driver. A person who has stolen identities before could pick you up at your house, and now he knows your name. Still, you might be thinking you're safe because Uber claims that drivers won't have full access to your contact information, and because you've used Uber and you've been fine. And anecdotal evidence will always trump someone else saying, "Trust me, this is bad," but "Trust me, this is bad." A woman in New York was picked up by a driver who, during the course of their ride, revealed a picture of her he had taken earlier. It had nothing to do with the ride. He just showed a picture he took on his iPad and said, "Is this you? Were you jogging earlier?" And it was her. She was understandably uncomfortable, so she ended the ride, reported the incident, and the driver was fired. And then, the victim was contacted by the fired driver. You might be tempted to say, "Daniel, that's a very specific case where one driver happened to see one future rider and take a picture of her. That's not indicative of every Uber driver, hashtag not all drivers." But you're missing the point. What he did shouldn't have been possible. Uber claims that drivers will not have access to your contact information. This is objectively not true, as this woman was personally emailed by the driver who took her picture. This same woman's friend was contacted by an Uber driver through Facebook who said, "I was your friend's Uber driver. She's cute. Is she single? LOL. Uber seemingly does not have control over its drivers or your privacy. And remember, they're giving jobs to people with a history of child exploitation and manslaughter, who got the job by watching a 13-minute YouTube video. The storm has knocked out the power, kids, and the Velociraptor cage is standing wide open. We mentioned earlier how Uber boasts its drivers can make $90,000 a year. It's the reason about 1,000 people immediately stopped watching this video at that moment to go sign up for Uber instead. That may have been true at one time, but it's not anymore. A journalist reporting for City Paper in Philadelphia actually worked as an Uber driver for a few months and learned that, at the end of the day, she was actually making roughly $9 an hour, which is only about $18,000 a year if you're working 40-hour weeks. To make $90,000, you need to work 27 and a half hours a day. See, the problem is that under this model, the burden for everything falls on the driver. It's great on Uber's end because they don't have to do anything. They're more like eBay than Amazon. They don't have to supply the cars, or pay for their repairs, or gas, or insurance. They don't have to buy a garage to park them in. Hell, they don't even actually employ anybody. All they do is provide a piece of software to connect cars and riders and take a 20% cut, plus some additional fees from every single ride. All those other expenses are covered by the driver. And while in the beginning, they did pay the drivers quite a bit because they needed lots and lots of them to sign up. They've been slashing their pay ever since. Some of that is due to competition, some of it is just because they can. How do you maintain good drivers if you gradually lower what you're paying them? You don't. You lose good drivers while maintaining or increasing the demand, which could only mean that you're incentivizing worse drivers, the kind of person whose time is worth less than $9 an hour, to sign up and snag as many rides as they can. So, who's behind all this? Here's a quote from BuzzFeed. A senior executive at Uber suggested that the company should consider hiring a team of opposition researchers to dig up dirt on its critics in the media, and specifically to spread details of the personal life of a female journalist who has criticized the company. So, female journalists were digging into the company to look into the possibility that Uber is unsafe for female drivers and riders, and the response from a senior-ranking Uber executive was a veiled threat at the safety of female journalists? Don't open old comic books to find poorly written cartoonish supervillains. We have them right now. Oh, and if anybody at Uber is trying to dig up dirt on me, here's some for free. I hate babies. I think they're just assholes. I've literally never met a good baby. I don't care what race, all of them. Any babies watching? F*** you. Did I mention that this company is worth $50 billion? That's the thing. The money keeps rolling in because they have a near monopoly on a service everybody wants. As long as that's true, they could hire Dr. Doom to be their CEO and nobody would care. We'd all just be like, oh, Dr. Doom's in charge now. That's, wow, a doctor, you say? He sounds smart. In Silicon Valley, they have a word for technology that just sweeps in and upends everything. The way file sharing blew up the music industry. Disruptive. It means the technology moves so fast that nobody even knows how to react. That's Uber. It's so big, it's growing so fast, that there are experts who think they'll not only swallow up the cab companies, but the automakers themselves in the future. Nobody will own their own cars. They'll just be an army of Ubers prowling around. Cars will be like DVDs. You can still buy one if you want, but for most people there won't really be a reason. And this Uber philosophy is taking over other industries too. You have companies like Airbnb, which is just Uber for hotels. If you're going to be out of town for a week, you rent out your house to a stranger and make some quick cash. Amazon is talking about doing their deliveries this way. Forget about UPS or the Postal Service. Just get some kid to throw it in his truck. There's an Uber-type service for movers, for real estate, even prostitutes. They all work on the same idea, to cut out the middleman. But here, the middleman was a trained professional who was supposed to be looking out for your safety. I'm not trying to stand in the way of progress. People want convenience, and these services are just convenient as shit. All I'm saying is that we, as consumers, need to stay sharp now more than ever. That's because history is bloated with examples of businesses and factories that practice shitty behavior. Child labor, sabotaging their competitors, exploiting and abusing their workers, etc. And we wag our finger at it like it's a thing of the past that happened before we knew better. But the reality is that those terrible people succeeded because they were able to give customers what they wanted. It turns out you can lower your prices quite a bit if your stuff is manufactured by a toddler getting paid in gruel. At some point it was us, the consumers, who said, you know what? We'll pay a little more if it means the goods are made by legal adults who get paid enough to eat. Right now, we're in that window where Uber seems too good to be true, and that's because it is. We have to be the ones to point at the dinosaur behind the fence and say, so you have more than just one guy working the dino security? What happens if the power goes out? What's a storm? What happens if literally anything? What's your plan there? Anybody? Anybody? I'm Daniel, and this has been Cracked Explains Why Uber is Terrible. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you subscribe and click there to watch a few more videos. And if you click the thumbs up button, we have this new software where instead of Uber, a cracked employee will pick you up at your home and drive you anywhere. We can't do that? Okay, we can't do that. We'll do the, just give it a thumbs up anyway.